if you're in Hawaii with me, but good evening if you're in South Dakota. Every time this show starts, I think it's a miracle. So I am actually coming to you from a treehouse. The beach house that we found on Airbnb when our flights got canceled back to South Dakota is filled with some cabin fever teenagers, and I chose the path of least resistance by just going out to this treehouse because they're not in here. So I have a few things that are a little different. I have my mic on, but I want to make sure that you can hear me because those waves are really loud. So hopefully you can hear me. And then as usual, I just love seeing people from across the country, actually across the globe. I was doing comments last night and somebody from Tel Aviv has tuned in, and that just amazes me, the size of a classroom when you really are trying to educate and trying to reach an audience that I think gets more attracted to this situation because of how scared everybody is. So yes, I'll just give you a couple of things that I did not bring to the treehouse that I remembered about 2 seconds before I started to push record. I didn't bring my tester. It's in the house, sorry. I didn't bring a drink, so I hope my voice doesn't need something to drink. I also had one of my top favorites that I left in South Dakota, and I was kind of complaining about it on social media. And I said to the salt company that I have come to love, Redmond Salt, that I miss my SOLé Water. If you watched a few podcasts, probably about 2 months ago now, I learned about this word called SOLé, S-O-L-E, SOLé, and it is where you put the salt crystal rock forms, not the ground up salt, in water, and you use this as, instead of salting your drinks, you just pour a little of this water in. I thought it was super silly, but I said, oh, what the heck, I'll try it. And I started putting it in my coffee, and it is so much better than just salt that I actually did a salt sucking video one day just saying, all right, this blew my mind because I didn't think it was going to be that attractive. And I got here in about week 2 of this extended stay in Hawaii, which I am thankful for, but I am not, I'm not overly, I did not plan for this. I have like 3 outfits, which is fine. I'm not worried about that, but I'm so thankful my family's together, because the other option was to find a solution for my son who goes to college here. And at that time, if he came home, he couldn't go back to school, and we didn't want that. But now the school's closed, so that turns out would have been whatever. Anyway, it's the first time my family's been to Hawaii. I have never thought more about getting a medical license in Hawaii than right now, because it is amazing how, I mean, the people are wonderful. They're shut down as well, but finding the positive. So I'm going to start with a couple of comments that lead me into some updates. I've had several people ask how my dad is, and he had been in the hospital, tested negative for coronavirus about 3 hours ago. He got put back in the hospital. So he is definitely immunocompromised. His immune system does not have the advantages as of many of you, but thanks to being in ketosis for the better part of 5 years, especially really hardcore the last 5 months. We're going to talk about immune systems here in a minute, so it does play in really well. Someone else commented on hyperbaric oxygen. I'll tell you that part of Grandma Rose's treatment was not only to get her ketones and her Dr. Boz ratio down to less than 20, but whenever we hit that Dr. Boz ratio of less than 20, we loved it when she could spend a couple hours in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. They lived 100 miles from one of those hyperbaric oxygen chambers, and that was crazy because we tried to get them to go 5 days a week, which is what you would recommend for the pressure size that one was. So the hyperbaric oxygen, for those of you that don't know, it's used by many athletes today. That might be where the most popular understanding of them are. Hyperbaric oxygen, again, it's like the opposite of going into an airplane where the air pressure the air particles get further apart. In hyperbaric oxygen, the pressurization gets the oxygen particles closer together. That high density of oxygen per unit of space improves the immunity. It also is known for wound care. We use it a lot for wound care. We use it for anybody who has the bends after scuba diving. But some of the best studies from the ketogenic cancer world were once you got your Dr. Boz ratio, once you got your GKI low enough, close to that 1-to-1 GKI or a Dr. Boz ratio less than 20, when they would put animals in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, incredible reversal of their cancer happened. So we did this with my mom, and it really, we tried to do it from 100 miles from the farm, but then I wrote a prescription for, or we got her a prescription for the hyperbaric oxygen chamber to be used in her home. So it cost like $5,000, so it was really expensive if you have one next door. But when you're driving 100 miles every day, and that's just one way, so 200 miles a day to stay in the chamber for just an hour, the cost was a little better at that point. Well, now the hyperbaric oxygen chamber is at my house because they have recently been going back and forth to the hospital. So when somebody asks me what's my take on hyperbaric oxygen chamber, I would say your benefit for the cost is minimal until you have the metabolic strength in your chemistry. But once you have the chemistry of a ratio, I mean, it's high ketones, low glucose, I am amazed at how much improvement it has. As a family, we've all gotten in it. I have a little wrestler who is at that age of puberty where not only is there some growing pains, but if you've ever seen the sport of wrestling, it's kind of awful. They get hurt, and as moms, I can hardly look. But there's a few times he's had an injury where he just went into the hyperbaric oxygen chamber, sat there with his iPad for a couple of hours, and it really is, he felt better. The literature behind it is really powerful, but I would say the cost of the hyperbaric oxygen chamber is, it's real, it's significant. I wouldn't encourage patients to do that until their metabolism or their Dr. Boz ratio is at least under 40, and I would love it if it was under 20. When we used it with Mom and during her cancer fight, we tried to get the numbers down to 20, and then she would spend a couple hours in the chamber trying to stack it several days in a row. So good question, though. I've been meaning to answer that several times. It's been asked. So other news, our flights with United have officially been canceled. So thank goodness for the drop in prices for Airbnb. And just the nicest people here we've met on the Big Island in Hawaii. I've seen several of you check in saying aloha. My kids take Spanish. I almost said hola, so, which is, yeah, just about as bad on the accent for both of them, I suppose. So I will tell you that one of the less than ideal situations I've had is I've made this personal commitment to trying to keep up with the comments that have been on the YouTube channel. But when we came to Hawaii, we didn't bring the kids' school stuff, and I usually answer those questions on my iPad. Well, my iPad has been completely confiscated by my almost 14-year-old. So I said he was 12 a minute ago. He's 13. He's about to be 14. And so I haven't had my iPad until last night. So I tried to go through a good couple hours of answering questions, but I'm like 3 weeks behind, so I'm sorry. But I will keep working on that. It is the first place I answer questions. So if you have a question, not only do I use that to try and figure out what to do for the show each week, your questions help me know what you're thinking. But I also just try to help you see that this resource of information is something I've worked really hard on to help empower you to find answers about your own health, trying to keep your costs low but keep the education as paramount. So thank you for tuning in. I had a pretty good response from last week, just covering something that wasn't very sciencey, but was definitely spot on for those who, yeah, all of us who are worried about how does the world turn in the next week and what does that really mean. So today's I decided not to put any flowers in my hair. This is actually the same lei that I bought about 2 weeks ago when I did the podcast. and it's still this pretty. Isn't that amazing? In South Dakota, it would never last this long. So I'm trying to optimize the light on my face, but I don't know if I'm doing a very good job here, so I'm sorry. I did ask the guy next door who's mowing his lawn to pause. He said he needed to get it done right away, so if you hear a lawnmower, sorry, I tried. All right, so this topic is something that I have been working on probably for 3 or 4 weeks. Some of the things I've done in the past week that, again, this is all unplanned for me. I was hoping to finish recording my online course, and that online course is now, I wonder if I just step out here. Anyway, I don't know if you can see me, but I'll come in a little closer. There we go. I don't know if you can appreciate that recording a series of videos, if you take a week break, sometimes you forget where did you leave off. So as I had gotten to a good stopping point in my recording for the online course, I did not even consider that I would be recording here in Hawaii. So here we are, and this past week I did almost complete all the recordings. I figured it out. It's probably not as high of quality as I was using at home, but I still think the message is awesome. My team has really been helpful at editing the videos and getting it to sound as good as we can. So thank you to my team, and I expect to be launching that really soon. If there was ever a time to study why is the ketogenic diet such a fulcrum for sorting people into health that's in danger versus health that's not in danger, or less in danger, if you will. Boy, times like this. So I'm trying to get this course out. I think it will be a huge benefit for many of you. If you have, in the show notes below, there is a link that says Toxic Traditions. So take a look at that. That will keep you on the mailing list for when it is released. I'm hoping it's sooner than later, and I look forward to your feedback. So today's video is on immunity, and I'll tell you where I got the topic from. Like I said, usually I'm reading your questions and I get good ideas from several questions that keep coming up. But one of my, I lead a support group for a ketogenic support group for my community. Now, usually we're in actual physical community. In fact, the way you get into the support group is you have to come once. And then there is an online way to dial in for those that just can't come. And South Dakota is known for its lovely weather. So, but since I've been trapped here, I get up at 2:30 in the morning and start the podcast, or start the support group at 3 o'clock in the morning Hawaii time. But it's been super helpful for us as a community just to be there for one another. But one of the gals asked a really good question, and she said, I've watched your shows over the last few weeks, and I'm a health coach that tries to use your teachings for my patients. But I've tried several times, and I'm not sure I can explain why the ketogenic diet is good for your immune system. I saw the cytokines, I saw the T cell stuff, but can you break it down for me a little simpler? And instantly I hear the words of my husband, who says, you need to quit trying to doctor speak and pretend you're trying to teach my dad or teach my kids. Because it is, once you simplify it, then people can all grasp that and build on that education. So I really found her question, spur of the moment, but really found the answer and the question to hit home for how would I explain this to my kids? Why would immunity be better on a ketogenic diet than when you're not on a ketogenic diet, and what is the difference? Now, specifically, this talk is going to be for adults, not for kids, but I'm gonna try to answer that and see how I do. All right, so let's look at this. All right, and I gotta move this guy over here. And all right, so how do ketones improve your immunity? That's what today's, so before I start on this, I just want to give you a quick shout out that if you look at the last time you had a serious infection, I want you to post in the show notes, what was your clue? How did you know you were sick? How did you know that this was not just a little thing, but really got your attention that you were sick? So those posts and those comments will help me when I get to the end of this. So this is the part where I push play and I can't really see if anything goes wrong. So I hope nothing goes wrong from this point because my team is taking a needed break. All right, so here we go. Did I do that right? Hold on one second. I'm going to escape. I don't think I did that right. Oh, I did not do it right. Aha. Okay, here we go. All right. So how do ketones improve immunity? That's what this is about, yes. All right, so I like to talk about ketones and immunity, but I think the better answer and the better first focus is to look at immunity and your immune response. Just take it back away from a ketogenic anything, and I want you to look at this little kid's injury because he scraped his elbow and it hurts, and we can all look at that, and if you're a mom or a dad or any caring human being, you're going like, oh, honey, I bet that really hurts. And the reason your brain says that is because you can see his immune system has responded to this injury. And how do you know it responded? It's that red part around his injury. Not only is there just a scrape, but his skin is going to be tender to touch in those areas where it's red. So you wonder what's going on in the areas where it's red. And this is what we call your acute or the short-term response of your immune system. So when he scraped his elbow, he didn't sterilize whatever he scraped it against. There were infections. There was bugs in the dirt in his skin. And those infections said, we've got an open door into this really rich resource of nutrients. So in go the infections. And that takes your little plasma cells and it wakes them up. They've been sleeping. They had nothing much to do. Life was pretty boring. And when a plasma cell goes from sleeping to awake, it starts to look at what their enemy is. So in this situation, I've given him a couple little bugs to fight. But as those plasma cells start to talk through your lymph system, throughout your special tunnels throughout the body, they send messages through a system called the cytokines. Specifically, the immunity of IL-1 and IL-6 are what responds. This is interleukin 1 and interleukin 6. They respond to your hurt, your infection. So as we look closer, we take those little plasma cells and we activate them. They do wake up, and as they awaken, they grab onto the bugs. They start to digest the bugs, or phagos. They just take a big chunk out of them. They start to make this really important IL-6, which is what makes that redness happen. And your brain instantly looked at that injury for this little kid. If you've had, we've all had this. We've all had where an infection started out as a tiny break in the skin, and suddenly the skin is red, or not suddenly, but over the course of 12 hours, it's red. It gets worse the next 12 hours after that. And we can be thanking interleukin 6 because of this. When interleukin 6 is looked at, the mediator, it is one of the things that makes you have a fever. So as I ask you to type in the comments, what was a signal that you had when the last time you got really sick? How did you know it wasn't just a little bit of a cough? And for those of you that have never had a serious illness, first of all, God bless you. But also, how did you know when a family member was really sick? The acute phase response is what that little boy's arm was going through, where the redness is all inflamed and swollen. But I love that interleukin 6 is in charge of the psychological. When we get psychologically stressed, we produce IL-6. It also is connected to cortisol, which then makes the IL-6 and releases it into our circulation. It spreads throughout our body. IL-6 is going to come to the end of this in just a minute. It does cross the blood-brain barrier and reset the temperature point. So they start to have a change in their temperature. And if you look at some of the global shifts we've had, of the normal human body temperature. Because of the global obesity, the human body temperature has decreased, and it's because of this little turkey here, IL-6. Secreted by macrophages to give specific microbial molecules. Again, it's asking the white blood cells and the system to respond to an infection, but it's also an inflammatory cytokine production. It signals other hormones to say, we have a problem, we have a break in the dam, somebody come help me, and it signals the rest of the body to respond. It also is produced by fat cells, and this is the other thing, where if you look at the C-reactive protein, it's one of the measurements of inflammation in the human body, and that inflammatory problem is higher, that C-reactive protein, which is much easier to measure than an IL-6. C-reactive protein is higher in people whose cytokine interleukin-6 is chronically high. And then we talked about T cells a while ago, so I thought I'd throw that in there, that it does talk to the T cells and how well it responds to invaders. How quickly will it respond? So this is in comparison. That was what we call an acute injury, okay? The kid scraped his elbow. He's going to be fine. But when you look at this picture, what do you see? Do you think that that is a recent injury? I hope your brain says not a recent injury. It is not a recent injury. If it says recent injury, you have never, it is a chronic illness. It's called psoriasis. It is an inflammation inside the skin, and it has taken years for his body to allow this to happen. This is a defection in his immune response. His immunity is now recruiting plasma cells, just like that injury did for the scrape in the elbow. But these plasma cells are much higher in number because they've been signaling for a long time. If you take a biopsy of that skin, we can find some infections that show up in there, but what we really see is high levels of inflammation. I put in a bunch of inflammatory cells or plasma cells, and I threw them in with a flame, because when you ask this guy, what does it feel like? He's like, it itches. Sometimes it's really hot. He's going to describe that it will be tender at times, but mostly there's a little warmth to it. It itches. It doesn't feel comfortable. He's going to have less symptoms at the site of this problem and more symptoms within his body. As you say, well, you say this has been going on for a while. What else has happened in your life that would relate to your health? And the answer is also, doc, I've been real tired. I've been stressed lately. I've not been sleeping. I had a major event in my life a year ago. Since then, it's gotten so much worse. And you will hear them describe what it looks like to be under chronic stress. So as we look at how can I, as a physician, when somebody walks into my clinic, how can I predict who has a poor immune system, whose immune system is filled with interleukin-6? And the answer really shows up with looking at insulin. Okay, so if you're new to the channel, my image for insulin is that, yes, I do demonize insulin. And insulin looks like this big flame with this really big forehead. The insulin guy is known for being in charge of taking care of these little characters, which are my glucose. So glucose, I match with insulin in color. They're both red. And when the glucose is elevated, the insulin's job is to tuck away. When you have more than about a tablespoon or 7 carbohydrates in your circulation, your body will store it away. Well, if you have, let's say you had 8 carbohydrates, and your body said, oh, we need to put a little bit away, it would give you a little bit of insulin, and then the insulin would tuck away. There would not be any flames with your insulin. But if you have excessive consumption of carbohydrates, to the point where the glucose becomes this major focus of your body, because you are adding glucose, And by golly, insulin will not let that go unnoticed. He grows larger, the inflammation associated with insulin gets worse, and that body inside starts to fail. And by fail, I mean the response that you should be having for every little invader that comes in. Your system gets weaker, it gets slower. The response of all of those hormones like interleukin-6, they failed. They are not doing what they're supposed to do. And as a result, the insulin grows louder. If you ask this man with psoriasis, what does it feel like to have psoriasis? He will not give much attention to that, to the psoriasis. He might say it's a little warmer and it itches, but he won't say what the little boy said, which is it hurts, don't touch it. If you push on it, I don't, they'll cringe. He doesn't have any of that. His inflammation is so chronic that it has done something to his skin that we can see. And that's why I picked psoriasis, because it's on the outside. We could have picked a lot of other things like lupus or chronic fatigue syndrome or depression. They are all linked to an increase in interleukin-6. And your immune system will be slower when interleukin-6 is that high. Now this is me weaving together some of those glucoses and then showing you that the big enemy is insulin, and I demonize insulin, and I get lots of people that write in saying, yes, it's vital for life. Yes, it is vital for life. But it is so overused in the audience that I see day in and day out that it almost is more of an enemy because of its excess. Now, you still need insulin to live, so don't get me wrong. But the real punchline here is, as you predict who's going to have the hardest time with getting an immune response, it has everything to do with what's been going on for the last several months. Getting this insulin down so that your system has a chance to reset these fat-based hormones, you will enhance your immunity, but it's not going to happen overnight. In fact, if there's one reason that quarantine needs to last 6 weeks, it's if you started the ketogenic diet today, you would have a whole beautiful new crop of cells fighting for your life in 6 weeks when you enter the community again. I like to show that if you have ketones in your circulation, so let's talk about my parents. Again, they're in their 70s. As we speak, my dad is in the ER getting admitted back to the hospital. He has no kidneys to fight his world, but he does have some ketones. And God bless his heart. I hope the ketones can be enough, Dad. But in his blood, like in your blood, you have glucose. Thankfully, in his blood, I know he has ketones. And what does that do to his insulin? I have hair right in front of mine. So as you look at the storage tank that's been going on in his body, the glucose is one of those places that you store a bunch of insulin, or excuse me, a bunch of glucose. Those bubbles are really supposed to represent glycogen bubbles, and the storage inside your muscles and your liver are very much connected to how long have you been storing and how much is there. You can only tap into those resources when the insulin, I don't know if you noticed, Mr. Insulin now has no flames on him. That's what insulin is supposed to look like. He's healthy. He's there to help when the sugars get higher than 7 carbohydrates in your blood. And for my dad, for many years, he had plenty of storage, like most South Dakotans, and he had a liver and muscle cells filled with so much glucose that he didn't need to eat carbs for probably 6 weeks. That's how full his body was. To empty out his system and to keep his insulin low, he ate fat. And that is where the restoration of his wore out hormones came from. So that man with a chronic illness, with a chronic psoriasis, if I said to him, I'm going to treat your psoriasis by stopping carbohydrates, he would look at me and say, I paid my copay for a cream. I want you to treat the skin problem. And I would say, okay, I can put some cream on there, but it is not going to fix the problem. The problem comes from deep within your bone marrow, within your cells, within the hormones that talk throughout your body. And they have been so inflamed that your white blood cells cannot fight off this little bitty problem in your skin. And when we give you the really high dollar ones, the ones that your insurance is really trying to find a way for you to not select because of its cost, but also it's really hard on the human body. And those are some immunomodulators. They're trying to go into your white blood cells and turn how they work. And the good news is it can stop attacking your skin, but it makes it so if some kind of virus comes into your body or you get a scrape on your knee, the bugs that come in there are also going to have an advantage because you took a medicine that stopped you from fighting infection. So instead of trying to block off part of your immune system, restore it from the roots, which is what a ketogenic diet does. Again, a ketogenic diet is not a place where you eat. A ketogenic diet is a chemistry set. So you just saw all those ketones come out of the liver. Your body makes ketones primarily out of the liver. Almost every ketone that you make comes out of the liver. And when I ask patients, with like this psoriasis patient, if he came in and said, but I'm having a tough time giving them up, how can I get ketones in circulation without, the strict diet? I would say it's much better if you use the diet, but if you put that special oil, the MCT C8C10, into your system, there is a portal vein that goes from your guts. It picks up nutrients from your guts that are this very specific size, MCT C8C10, make sure the label says that, and puts that oil right into your liver. And the only thing your liver knows to do with this is to make a ketone. So even when insulin was really high, MCT into the body MCT C8C10 into the body could raise those ketones to a point where it was strikingly improved. If you go back to one of the brain lectures that I talk about, we took people with dementia, mild dementia, and they were not ketogenic. They were standard American diet kind of people. And we gave them 30 grams of MCT on day one. Let me tell you, if you have ever bought the soft gels that I sell online, every MCT soft gel is 1 gram. So they would take 30 of those every day. Most people stopped the study because they got diarrhea. Their gut could not absorb that much oil. So you're not in a study. This isn't a race. You need to succeed. Start with a couple capsules, then go to 3 capsules, then go to 4 capsules, then go to 6 capsules. And what you're doing is go until your ketone numbers are what you want them to be. I'm sorry I forgot my little poker today, but it is what it is. So as you look at the production of ketones for people who are looking at how can I do this without compromising, some people, as much as you see the health benefits, they can't seem to make the switch. Which brings me to, I'll finish this loop up in just a minute. It brings me to the man who I was reading a study about, and he is the reason I'm looking at the study that'll be in the next slide. This is just my little slide that says, yes, fat is fit, and he's not fat. He has lots of ketones around, and when the ketones move into the system, it is a sign of improved immunity, improved white blood cells, and this is the goal that I'm trying to communicate to say, why is a ketogenic a better place for your immune system? And it has everything to do with the chemistry set behind there. So I'm going to go into this study, but before I do that, I want to talk about the man that I was referring to. So I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast again, and one of the physicians who is the chair of tropical medicine and pediatrics, and I can't remember which place he's from. Anyway, he was doing this interview, and he is a virologist. He's an expert. He's talking about immunity and how much his education in the last 3 weeks has really helped the country. He was on the podcast with Joe Rogan a year ago, or maybe a little longer than that, when he had some really terrible lifestyle things. Like Joe Rogan was talking about, what way, first of all, how did we get here, and how did this get to be such a problem? And the virology expert was reporting that, yes, this virology issue isn't new. We've had warnings of SARS and of, I'm forgetting the name of the other one, where the outbreaks happened throughout the country or throughout the globe, but thankfully dwindled away. The sudden sudden respiratory one, the SARS, sudden acute respiratory distress, much more lethal. So as soon as they got sick, they went into the hospital. As you look at some of the other ones that have had eruptions since the turn of the century, again, they were different than the COVID-19. And that is because the COVID-19, we have lots of people out in the world that pass it from one another. And without a vaccination, it really is going to be difficult to know, is it okay to return to our normal life? A couple of things he pointed out was that, the vaccination will be the ultimate way that we can be safe. Unfortunately, if you've had coronavirus and you want to say, well, can I just check to see if I have the antibodies? You say, great. Does that mean you can go back out in public? And I would caution you to say that's not exactly how this works. To go back out in public with immunity, if the infection still comes into your body, yes, you are immune, but the infection will still try to set up a home, and until your body kills it, which could be just a day or so, and you may, again, never have a symptom, your body can spread it to those that are more immunocompromised. So as much as I've said, flippantly, all right, just give me the infection so I can get over it and we can get back to life. But again, that isn't exactly how it works. You really do have to remember that a second exposure really, I'm protected, my body will be fine, but as my body is fighting it off for those first couple of days, depending on how strong my immune system is, will depend on how long that little turkey lives inside my upper respiratory system. So as you look at this, I want you to take notice that this study came out yesterday, and it's another part of this global unity that I just want to praise the scientists and the leaders of communities and those in a hospital setting right now, serving our people. Thank you. There is something very important in a research world, that is when you have a discovery or when you have information, that you get credit for it. And getting credit is one thing, but in order to get the credit, studies need to go through a peer review. So as you look at the peer review, that means that your colleagues have studied it, they approved how you did the work, and this is what, if you can see it's on here, it says the article is a preprint and has not been certified by peer review. So again, he says, here's what we found. We published this on April 4th, like yesterday, or maybe it was April 3rd. It's like within the last 2 days. For him to say, if you look at how can we predict who is going to end up in the hospital and be the one that's on the respirator, be the one who needs the ventilator? And the answer is IL-6. And you can actually download, in the show notes, you'll find this, this DOI. And if you type that in, you can go and read the whole study. You can look at when their IL-6 was low and not chronically inflamed. So think of the little kid. The little kid's IL-6 is perfect. He has an injury, his body responds with this little blow up of his arm, it takes care of it and goes back to a low level. When you look at folks as they age, especially aging in the setting of high insulin, insulin predicts the level of cytokines that are present. And the higher the cytokine, it does not mean better immune system. It means worse immune system, because you need those cytokines to peak and valley when an invader comes. And that guy's psoriasis that you see just swarming over his skin is because he cannot protect, he's attacking himself. Not only are there, yes, there's infections in most psoriasis when you take a biopsy, but they're usually fungal and they're not very, they're low-grade infections. That's not the biggest cause. The biggest cause is you don't have an immune response that can handle repairing itself. And instead, it's attacking your own skin layer. And it's not doing it once or twice, it's doing it again and again. So in this study, and you can go click on the study and read it yourself, the risk of respiratory failure for patients with IL-6 of greater than 80, which is a pretty high number, was 22 times higher compared to the people with the low IL-6. Now, that's powerful. I mean, that is looking at, when I say, what am I trying to get at when I say with a ketogenic diet, you do have an improved immune system. But remember, the diet isn't about food. It's about what your number is. You should be checking your glucose and your ketones. And if you want to use the GKI, then you can do the math to do that. If you want it to be simpler, you take your glucose, you divide by your ketones. Do not lose your head that they have different units, just trust me. And you divide the two. If the number's lower than 100, you're doing pretty good. But if you take that number and it's lower than 80, you might get autophagy. Again, autophagy is something that I've talked about a few times. I love the topic. I'm sure if I start, I'll go for 15 minutes, so I'll try not to do that. But you can say you are pretty much guaranteed weight loss. If you've got it to lose, you will lose weight. And I have had lots of people write in saying, can I be on the ketogenic diet and not lose weight? I'm like, yes, you can. I'll show you. But if you look at most people who have the weight to lose, once they get that chemistry set below 80, what it means is your insulin lowered. And for right now, you're eating a few enough carbs and making enough ketones to empty out the storage called your fat cells. And that storage is correlated with a lower insulin, a reset of your cytokines, an improvement of your immune system, at least a little bit. If you can get your numbers to be less than 40, and if you follow me on Instagram, I post every week what it looks like when I fast. I start after the podcast right now, so on Sundays, which is much earlier in the day here than it is in South Dakota. And I fast, not based on a clock, but based on my metabolism. How long does it take me to get my immunity down to a 40? I want to make sure to spark my white blood cells to make the healthiest levels, the healthiest versions of them, which means the insulin is going to be low and the cytokines are going to have a rest, but it comes with me not eating anything but salt, water. Oh, thank God for my salt this week. I'm so excited to fast with my little salt stuff. If you wanted to see what I'm talking about, I think I put a link in the show notes. If not, I'll go back and do that later too. It is really, I cannot tell you how much I like this stuff. And as I look at adding salt to my coffee, or even a little bit to my water if I don't want to have coffee late at night, I cannot tell you how much easier it is to get through when I started using this SOLé water. Again, it's got that crystal. You put it in a glass jar. Do not put metal with it. And then don't put a metal spoon in to take the water out. Use a wooden spoon or a plastic spoon, or just kind of pour it out of the glass jar. But what you find is replacing these minerals becomes critical in keeping you healthy. So this is where the evidence, when you look at GKI and you translate that to a Dr. Boz ratio of 40 or less, this is where I can say we are really confident that you are improving your immune system if you get your Dr. Boz ratio to 40 or less. So if you're one of those newbies and you're trying to say, I want to not have a high IL-6, I want to not be one of the ones on the respirator, I don't know how we're going to get through the next year without a vaccination, because that's the closest we can have this is in a year, and not have everybody infected. So the best answer is to have a better immune system. I do not have a prescription for this. You have to do a reset of your immunity, a reset of your body. And that comes with studying your numbers. Again, the best chance of autophagy is if you can get it less than 20. I do not reach for that. Sometimes I get there if I'm feeling good, but 4 teenagers all being homeschooled by me, and a husband who's decided he's going to take up fishing because it's easier to be out of the house during homeschool hours. Whatever. Anyway, that's the goal that we had for Grandma Rose when she was going through cancer. That's what we would help her to be at before we would spend the money to be in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. You look at the protocols for when they do use a hyperbaric oxygen chamber in the research studies for cancer, and they are pushing their GKI to 1:1, which is a Dr. Boz ratio of 20. That improvement, that level of immunity is, that level of metabolism, is a powerful predictor for enhancing the healthy cells and really causing those cancer cells to have apoptosis, which is cell death, something cancer cells do not do very easily. And also autophagy. If you do have a baby cancer cell and you want it to not grow into a cancer cell, this is the place it starts, where you have a signaling of any kind of misfit protein that gets recycled and used for resources other places. That's what autophagy does. And you can calculate it as long as you're checking your numbers. Have I said that enough times? All right, I think this image is just one more way to say, you look at what we are looking at to say, why does a ketogenic diet have a better immune system? And the answer, the one-word answer, isn't ketones, it's insulin. Oops, I pushed go too quickly there. There's my evil. That's not coronavirus, although it looks kind of like him. Let me go here and go to here. So as you look, woo, I'm just going to make sure that you all get a beautiful look at what is out here on this place that we get to call our home for a little bit. So check that out. How cool is that? I think it's awesome. All right, so actually, maybe I should come over here in the sun. Okay, maybe not. My sons helped set this up for me. Wasn't that nice of them? Mm-hmm. All right, so you can kind of see. I don't know if you can tell me that you can still hear me. Would be really good. So let's see. All right, so. All right, so I am going to look at some of your comments here, but also just say I will take a moment to say the blessings that you have. Last week I spent time saying, you know what, we are all in this together. It really is a difficult time for lots of people. Thank you for telling me you can still hear me. I just saw that on your comment. That's really helpful. The danger of a beautiful timeout, and I say that perfectly, I say that on purpose. We all probably needed a timeout. You look at the 21st century, and it is filled with busyness. It is filled with times when we push too hard. I'm from the Midwest, and we have this built into our Norwegian culture that you are more valuable if you work harder. You are less of a burden on society if you keep doing something. I think it's here in Hawaii too, though. I mean, even though they have the beautiful beach, that poor man couldn't not do his lawn at this hour because that's when he always does it. Just trying to find my microphone. Oh, good, it's close to my mouth. Okay, perfect. So as I look at the immunity and the summary of what that has to do with last week's question of what are you grateful for during this time? I said this last week, but I'll say it one more time. I did not slow down very well. I am perfectly designed to be just like my dad, who works a little too often and too hard and doesn't slow down very well. And I would have never agreed to just stay in Hawaii this long. I would have said, no way. I'm sure the world's going to stop turning if I'm not home. And the answer was, yeah, it's not fun to be away from mom and dad when he's sick. And I'm sorry I can't be there for you, Dad. I am praying for you. I also know that without visitors, it's pretty lonely in there. So I'm going to do a big shout out to say I am grateful that I'm here with my family and I am taking the time to enjoy this. I have almost finished writing my book too, which I probably would have not pushed this hard to get it done if it wouldn't have been for hours of homeschooling and finishing up the online course. So there's a couple questions here. I'm going to go to your questions and I will answer some of the ones that come up and then some of them that are back here. Actually, I think I'm going to leave it on this screen. There's somebody who asked when my ketones are going to be available. I hope in the next week. There have been a few times where sitting still on the phone with Amazon has also been not something I enjoy doing, but I've had time to do that too. So I don't know if it helped at all. I think it was just timing, but they are super close to having everything reset. They are sitting there waiting to be mailed. I wish I had my own online course, I wish I had my own online service set up, but I don't, and I'm now in Hawaii, so I thought about doing it, but now they're just sitting there waiting to be mailed. So As soon as they give me the go-ahead, I will mail them and they will be online again. That again is something I would have told that psoriasis patient to start looking at your ketone level, and one of the ways to do it is to have exogenous ketones in there. All right, so I'm going to go back to some of the questions that all of you have typed in. Let's see. So there's Laura Lee who says, I've been doing alternate day intermittent fasting and started adding walking a good chunk of it uphill on days that I fast. I wake up the next morning with nausea. So when you look at that, there's a good answer for that. So let's talk about that. First of all, if you're new to the ketogenic diet, I actually just recorded this part in my online course yesterday. I do not recommend exercise. No exercise for at least, I actually push them to 6 weeks. You are honing a skill of eating better. And when you start doing too many things like, oh, let's eat better, let's exercise, all the things that life needs to have these improvements on, they fail. They go one step forward and 10 steps back. So I tell people, no exercise until you're keto adapted. You are doing so many chemistry shifts that it fits perfectly with staying indoors. If you're starting the ketogenic diet, do not add exercise. But when you're trying to enhance your Dr. Boz ratio, you're much further in that keto continuum. Let's see if I have a picture of that to show you. Oopsie daisy, I didn't mean to push that. Let's see here. I might not have. Do I have that on here? I don't know if I do. I should have it on here, but I don't know if I do. Let's go to, give me 1 minute, just 1 minute, and see if I can. Betcha I don't have it on here. I'm sure it's here if I just slow down. Oh, here it is, keto continuum. Oh, good. Okay, so let's do that transition. Okay, so this is studio mode. So this is the keto continuum, and I'm going to start at the top. And this is, again, what I do a lot of in my course, looking at, if you're a beginner, there is this process that you are going to start the ketogenic diet with less than 20 carbohydrates a day. But I always like to show you what yesterday looked like, which is you ate every 2 to 4 hours, because that's what carb fuel lasts, is about 2 to 4 hours. When you get to 20 carbs a day, within about a week, you're eating every 6 to 8 hours. And it's brilliant. It's amazing how much less fuel they need. You stay there until you accidentally miss a meal. And this, if you look right next to that, it says chemistry carries you. That's what's happening. You get the chemistry set that really improves how your body works. And that's what I think will take you. If you look way over on this side, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks for this to happen. And that gal who wrote in, Laura Lee, says, yes, I get nausea when I work out the next morning. So what she's probably done is she's got intermittent fasting, so she's probably living at one of these baselines. Maybe she eats all of her calories in 1 hour. Maybe she eats 16/8. But every once in a while, she does what I do, which is she does a fast. So I think her fast said alternate day fasting, or intermittent day fasting, alternate day intermittent fasting. That's what she said. Okay, so that means at some point she's either doing 36 to 48 hour fasting. She wakes up in the morning, and during the fasted state, she exercises and gets nausea. And what does that? It is because she surges her ketones when she's fasted. So now she's got her liver empty. She's got a low glucose in the morning. She's been doing it long enough that she doesn't have a big storage tank that she's had in the past, which is a whole bunch of glycogen in her muscles or liver. And when she exercises, she raises those ketones. If she would check during exercise, at first she burns them, but her liver goes, oh boy, we need some more energy, and it makes a bunch of ketones at that time. And high ketones cause anorexia. You do not want to eat. When people say, I can't believe I eat so much less on the ketogenic diet, you're like, yep, that is a chemistry. It is more than just a fuel. There's a transmission of messages that happen with your immune system, but there are a transmission of messages that happen with ketones. If you get your blood meter, and if you aren't looking at this, you don't need to use a blood meter until you get keto adapted, but if you're trying to improve your immune system, you're gonna have to calculate this. So I would push you to get it. I know in my online course I tell you don't need one until you're in the advanced levels, but you do actually, if you want to watch immunity, if you're trying to lower your IL-6, you got to check your numbers. I don't know how else to do it. The urine won't get you there. The urine test strips, I mean. So as she gets to that second day and her ketones are high, not only is she signaling her body that she is in a fasted state, that it is using the resources of her fat to fuel her body, but when you peak it high, you get nauseated. So I would tell you salt really helps. As much as I thought table salt would do it for most people, I can't believe how much better I feel in the last 6 weeks of even pushing workouts when I'm fasting, getting into almost a 70-hour fast a couple of times, not because I was planning on it, but just life and time zones and yeah, anyway. Quite a transition. So if you look at that link to the salt down there, the other place that you can find that some of my favorites is if you go to bozmd.com, BOZMD.com, and you click on the thing that says Dr. Boz Favorites, and you'll find all the things I like. So the salt's on there. All right, let's get a couple more questions, and then we'll call it an hour. Let's see. A couple people went to school. Somebody went to School of Mines. End-stage COVID-19 is a cytokine storm, as by Don Costello. That's who went to School of Mines. That's obviously South Dakota. Maybe that's not obvious, actually. That's in South Dakota. Let's see. I have, let's see. So somebody gets into cholesterol here. I would love to talk on that one, but it'll take me too long. So let me go to the bottom here. So on my computer, you can see a lot of yes, my computer's just being a little bit slow, so hang in there. So actually, Francis Mills writes in and says, Dr. Boz, hi from South Carolina, is there evidence that deep ketosis will help you fight or protect from this virus? And there isn't nobody's studied COVID-19 until just recently. If you follow that link that I posted you to, you will notice that it is the location where hats off went to these researchers who have immunity who have been posting their trials as they come out. And it's before the peer review is done, which there's like rules against that in medicine. And the people who are doing it are sacrificing, and I just want to praise them for sharing the information, which is so important. But they're small studies. I think the one that I quoted today was under 30 patients, or maybe between 30 and 50 patients. It wasn't this 5,000 people one, though. It's smaller. The good news is that he shared the information as soon as the data came through, and that's a powerful number, that powerful turnaround time for just the number of hours he had the information, typed it up, and shared it with us. But it's that site that these scientists are posting their information. So if you like scientific studies, this one was a day old that I posted, and it was on target for something where I know that explaining immune systems can be geeky and awful, but essentially your body's response is based on how you've taken care of yourself. So I'm going to do one last thing before I sign off. I'll go over and put the comments so that everybody else can see them too here. Come on. Come on. There we go. All right. So one last thing. This man that was on the Joe Rogan show, he is a super scientist. He is on point for teaching medical students and advising them, and he is in the throes of really answering the call to be the best service to humanity that he can. But Joe Rogan asked him a couple questions, like, what are you doing to help yourself? What are you doing to help yourself? And he's like, well, I'm really not sleeping. I really can't sleep. I've lost my appetite. I'm not hungry. I have lost 6 pounds or something like that. And you could just hear, it was a video, so you could see the stress in this man. And here is a man who is, he is all science. He knows more about the immune system and the immune response than anybody. And to look at him and know he's overweight, he doesn't sleep well, his ability to shut down. Joe Rogan was talking about heat shock proteins, and he's like, I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about that. And a few podcasts ago, I kind of made fun of Joe Rogan for saying that the heat in the sauna was going to take care of the virus. And he's definitely come back several times and said it's not the heat, it's the heat shock proteins. And that response of your immune system, of stressing your immune system on a regular basis. Again, looking at how well can your body rise and fall in response to a stimulus. And I just want to ask everybody to pray for the scientists and the doctors and the frontline leaders in our communities whose health might not be very good. Their immune systems probably need a ketogenic diet, and they don't know what that is. They don't have any better guard against this than we do. But to pray that they may have the best grace and luck and God's protection as they are helping our communities fight this unprecedented situation of a viral takeover. Well, I will get to your question, get to your answers. I want to say thank you for everybody that joined in, and I will be here next week. I might do it from the treehouse again. It was pretty successful. So if you do have any sound issues that you didn't like the treehouse, I don't ever go back and listen to myself. So it's great to hear what your comments are. I feel thankful I answer your questions. So I'll be signing off. I look forward to your comments, and I will get to them this week. God bless all of you. Stay home. Get your ketones high and your glucose low. We're Dr. Boz Channel, improving your health one ketone at a time.